Another episode of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. This is the place where you're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
Well, hope y'all are doing okay in this heat. We're going to have that for the next couple of weeks. So stay inside, be cool, and listen to Mr. Allard's Neighborhood, and you'll get enlightened and cooled off and excited at the same time, or something like that.
Yes,
How
sir.
you doing, Taylor?
I am well. How are you?
You know, Saturday night, rather, we were at a Sunday school party, and the men and I started talking about electric cars and all the issues. Got to have you on the show as a guest to talk about the values of electric cars, because they had a lot of questions, and I didn't have any answers, of course, but there's a few things you can talk about it. So they're all convinced.
Well worth the investment.
Conspiracy. Well, they think it's a conspiracy with Joe Biden. So
I can rest assured to tell you that I don't think Elon Musk likes Joe Biden.
Oh, well, okay. I don't know.
But different show, different time.
Yeah, it is. I'd like to do that sometime, honestly, because I think it really would be a good show to talk about, because the people that own those cars, besides yourself, I mean, I know several people that own hybrids or whatnot. They really like them. They just
especially right now.
Well, yeah, it's not just that, but it's also what's the best way to put it? It's also the lack of maintenance, I guess, is what I'm getting around to. They seem to like that a lot, because they don't have to worry about the oil changes and all this other business.
No oil changes, no nothing.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
The only fluid in my car is the windshield wiper fluid.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, we'll save that for another show. I was just kind of browsing through the news before I got on. Boy, this is taking a beating. It really has been.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not reliant upon my retirement 401ks or my wife's 401ks or anything like that for it. But my gosh, we've lost nearly 5,000 points in value in the Dow Jones alone. And that's almost a seventh of its value. That's trillions of dollars in value, paper value, that's been lost. And, people say that's a sign of a recession. It's a reaction to what they think is going to happen. It's a reaction to, they think a recession is going to come. And I read today, Larry Summers, who is this Democrat apostate, apparently he used to work for Obama and for Bill Clinton. And he's going around saying, expect one by this time next summer. And they're telling him to shut up. The Democrats are saying, they're helping the cause. It's just interesting, because when I go in there and I talk about recession, I pull from guys like that. Him and a guy named Mark Zandi, who is the head of Moody's rating services, who also worked for Obama, because if they're saying these things, then there you go. I mean, it isn't just some Fox News talking point or something like that. Anyway, before we jump into today's show, which is the proposed Senate deal on guns, I want to run through the sponsors. If I have time, I'll talk about a couple other things, but I was hoping to talk about the January 6th hearings, but I don't want to cram that in. I've already run long last couple of times, so I'm going to maybe save that for tomorrow. But anyway, thank you, Daniel, CrossFit Burleson, 317 Southwest Wilshire. Check out their webpage, www.crossfitburleson.com. Find out their rates and the training programs and hours of service and things of that nature. It's behind the Stone Soup Cafe and that strip mall back there. And it's a great studio, and you'll get a good workout, a serious workout. Also, thank you to Shandy Stogstill Realty. Every time we get on with anybody that has anything to do with the business community here, whether it be real estate or not, they all talk about the rising cost of property in this town. So you need to talk to Shandy Stogstill, because if you're going to move, or maybe move your business even, you need to talk to her to find out what's going on, because she knows where things are happening before they make it to market. Also, her 817life.com page is very, very helpful. It's a good marketing tool. And so look on that, become part of that. Be glad you did. But Shandy Stogstill, who you need to talk to if you want to talk about real estate. Also, Rex Russell, boy, if you don't have a financial advisor, I'd get Rex right now, because the market is going crazy. And we were talking not that long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and most of his clients are maintaining their composure, but it's getting tough. The market this morning was over 800 points down. Now it's 675 points down. So it's improved, if you want to call it that. But you need somebody like Rex Russell to help navigate what's going on. myfinancialbox.com, hit the link, get to know him, become a client, and he can help you navigate through this crazy time. Also, if you need some other kind of investment, jewelry is a good investment. Southern Gem, fine jewelry and gemstones. Gala is returning back from Vegas from a jewelry convention, so I hope she had a good time. How can you not have a good time at a jewelry convention in Vegas? I don't know. She will. Anyway, it's on top of the Windmiller building. She has great inventory, great services, like cleaning and repair and all the above. So it's a great place to go. And so Southern Gym, talk to Gayla or talk to my wife. She's working this week. Anyway, thank you, Michelle. I know it's really hot outside, but the best kind of workout is inside at HotWorks with the infrared system because you won't get your body won't get as stressed. So if you're looking for workouts or something like that, she's the place to go because they got all these different workout regimens. It's all these different types of programs. It's not just one type of program. It's what fits your needs and fits your preferences. So go to HotWorks over in 731 over at the Commons by Kroger and the theater and all that. Also, thank you to Mandy Harden at Creative Concepts by Mandy. I'm going to be getting some gear pretty soon. I'm sure my numbers will jump through the roof once they see Taylor walking around in a Mr. Allard's Neighborhood hat. Don't you think?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I bet you. And coffee mugs and stuff are coming my way, and we may have more. This depends on my budget. All righty. So let's talk about the proposed gun proposal. I'm going to go over the details. Just a few oversights of it, or overviews of it, rather. When I saw this yesterday, I had a news blast right in the middle of Sunday school. I didn't say anything about it, but I knew I needed to check it out. So when I got home, what I saw was, I thought, a pretty legitimate step towards solving some of the problems. Now, there's no way those on the far left or far right are going to be happy with this deal. The far left, like AOC has already criticized it, are not going to be happy with anything else than gun bans and gun confiscations. The far right is not going to be happy with anything at all that gets in the way of gun ownership. But the majority, I think the vast majority of Americans are going to look at this deal and say, well, there's parts of it I like, other parts I can live with. I like it for the most part. And I'm not going to be letting the little tidbits here and there that I may not be jumping to joy with to get in the way of the overall picture. This is probably the most significant attempt on a bipartisan basis in the Senate to address some of the real issues of our gun problems in a long, long time. Now, again, there will be attempts on the far left and far right to sabotage it. And there'll be threats and all sorts of lobbying efforts and things of that nature. But my hope is that this makes it through the Senate. Now, again, legislation and politics is the art of the possible, not the That's one of the things that I've been taught, and I do teach for years, is that true politics is knowing how to take half a loaf and calling it a win, as opposed to, it's all or nothing. Ronald Reagan was one of the great presidents in this. Reagan, is a great conservative, but he was not an ideologue. And so when he dealt with the Democrats in Congress during his term, if he got about 65% or 70% of what he wanted, he'd call it a win and move on. He also understood the idea that politics was not this zero-sum game, that only way I can prosper is if my opponents falter and fail. He always understood that if you gave to the opposition enough for them to save face, to be able to go back to the constituents and say, well, we did the best we could, and here's this and this that we managed to get in there. Reagan was understood that if you allowed your opponents to have a little bit of, just a little victory, instead of just insisting on their total and complete defeat, then politics would be working. And politics hasn't worked well in the last decade and a half because of the winner-take-all, zero-sum mentality that's particularly in the House and has infected the Senate. This is what the Senate used to look like, by the way, this bipartisan agreement, the bipartisan negotiation. This is what the Senate was set up to do. I hope this is a good object lesson for those who are paying attention to what's going on in this whole process, because that's what the Senate looked like. The Senate, unfortunately, has taken on the characteristics of the House in the last decade, 2 decades, where the House is a bunch of screamers and hair pullers and bomb throwers, and the Senate was supposed to be the place where things calm down. This was the original design. That's why we had a Senate, to cool things off, as they said back in the day. There was always this analogy about hot tea in the saucer, and the Senate was supposed to be the plate that cooled off the tea. And this is how it's supposed to look. Now, again, you may not be 100% happy with this, but if you're expected to be 100% happy, you're looking in the wrong area. And really, that's one of the big fault lines in our democracy, is that we have lost the art of compromise. Compromise does not necessarily mean an abandonment of principle. What it means is that you give, they give, we call it even. Compromise is the grease that makes our Constitution work and our government work. But we've turned that word into a pejorative, that he compromised on this or she compromised on that, just because she didn't, throw herself in front of a train on latest legislation. So anyway, I digress. Let's talk about what it is. I'm going to go over piece by piece the main points of it and, give commentary. It would be, according to the Morning News and the Wall Street Journal and the Post and the Times and the National Review. I looked at all 3 or 5 of those to get more or less a comprehensive view of it. And they all said roughly the same thing. One of them says here, one part of it, giving states and tribes resources to create laws that keep deadly weapons away from those the court has determined to be a danger to themselves or others within state and federal due process and constitutional protections. While the term is not explicitly mentioned in the statement, the language, say it right, the language mirrors red flag law seen in states across the country. Now, we don't have a red flag law in this state. This piece of legislation does not mandate we have a red flag law, but what it does is provide the funding to have a red flag law. Now, I would invite you, while I'm thinking about it, to go back and listen to the conversation Seth Reeves and I had last Thursday. It's on YouTube and podcasts. And I agreed with some and disagreed with some of him, and it was a very civil debate. But one of the things that we had concerns about, I did primarily, was the red flag laws. This does not mandate Texas has it. What it mandates is the money's going to be there, and it's going to be integrated with a larger system if we do. The language that it would protect within state and federal due process and constitutional protections is an important clause. The real problem, I don't have a problem with the idea of a red flag law in and of itself. My problem was how does one get protected from being arbitrarily put on it for the wrong reasons? And they made it pretty clear that what would have to happen is it's going to have to be determined to a danger to themselves by the court and medical professionals working together, as opposed to an arbitrary placement upon a red flag list. And Seth and I both talked about the potential problems this would have for us as educators. Would we have the ability or be given the ability to put people on a red flag list? Well, that's a very dangerous thing to do, to put that in the hands of civilians without authority or professional expertise. Because if you will have teachers who will place kids on red flag lists just because they don't like the way they look or act. I'm about to sneeze. There you go. A lot of dust in the air today. Anyway, the point is that I'm glad they made it explicitly clear that it's going to be done through legal and medical professionals. Now, I'll get to the other parts of the law that make it more likely that somebody could, by a legal or a judicial authority, could be put on this, because there'll be other assets made available. But as far as the states being mandated to have red flag laws, that is not the case, but the money will be there. The processes will be there. And I am in favor of a red flag law as long as it's done within the boundaries of the 14th Amendment. Okay. There have been episodes where people were put on no-fly lists, for example, by malevolent actors, and people that did not deserve to be on no-fly list found themselves put on it for whatever reason. I don't want that to happen with this, but I'm encouraged. Now, will the state of Texas do this? I have some doubts, but let's see what happens. All right, because the lead negotiator for the Republicans was Senator Cornyn, who's, by the way, getting a lot of hammering on Twitter because the Twitter goons are out in force, and there you go. Second one, incorporating juvenile and mental health records from local law enforcement and state databases into the federal background check process for gun buyers under age 21. That was something Cornyn had. I am on board. Basically, they're saying that if you're under 21 and you want to buy a gun, they're going to check not just your record as you turn to being an adult, but also any kind of juvenile record. Now, if you got picked up for shoplifting at Walmart, if that is even a crime in some states anymore, but if you got something like that, it's not going to keep you from getting a gun, but it will keep people like the young man in Buffalo, maybe. Now, the problem with the Uvalde shooter is that he had no record, medical or judicial, that would have well, at least not on the medical scene, that would have prevented the gun ownership. But he was known to be firing BB guns. Got misdemeanors for being a pest and shooting BB guns at people, and also, he was also guilty of animal cruelty, which is a crime. And so, if we had this law in place, that would have showed up. So I'm definitely on board with the juvenile records. Now you're saying, well, should something at the age of 13 keep a young man or young woman, mostly young men, from buying a gun, a rifle at 18? Well, it depends on the misdemeanor. Now, if we're talking about skipping curfew or truant or something like that, that's one thing. But if we're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about assault, we're talking about some of the more serious crimes, a gun crime, on and on and on. Yes, this idea that when they turn 18, the slate is magically wiped clean and all their past indiscretions and all their past behavior is no longer pertinent is craziness. It isn't like they turn 18 on June 1st, but on May 31st is this rogue and felon, and June 1st, all of a sudden they're washed of all sins. I fully support this. And I don't know if the states really have much to do about this because it is a federal law. And again, since Cornyn was pushing on this pretty good, I have a feeling if there's any adaptation for Texas, then they're going to follow suit. At least I sure hope so. Next one. Here's another one I'm on board with, and so is Seth. Expanding access to mental health services, suicide prevention programs, and other community services like crisis and trauma intervention and recovery. Expansion of online access to mental health services for children and families in crisis through telehealth are also included. Amen and amen. Okay. The Republicans and the NRA have always said the real problem is not guns, it's mental health. Now, okay, so they're calling your bluff, NRA. This is something that both Seth and I were firmly in agreement on, is that the real problem isn't so much that no one misunderstands the role mental health plays in this, but there's not enough assets. There's not enough uh, ability to access help. We talked about the Uvalde shooter and all these people in his life that understood that this guy had a real problem, and they should have done something about it. I'm not absolving them whatsoever. But if you're, somebody who's not in touch with how the system works, you need to know where to go. And you need to know where to go. And we need to provide better mental health care for this country, period. Okay? When we talk about what is the role of government, we could debate that at all, but you can't just rely on the private sector to provide all the mental health care services because a lot of people can't afford it. They don't have access to it. They don't know where to go. We need to have at Texas at the county level assets made available that if I have a child and my son or daughter is exhibiting very dangerous behavior, and it doesn't just happen to be towards others, it could be towards themselves, or their suicidal tendencies, that I know that my financial status is not going to prevent me from getting that young person treatment. That I may not have the wherewithal. Most of these people don't. Having coverage for mental health care is definitely something that is a privilege in a sense. Having coverage for mental health care is not something that everybody has. It's not covered by the federal or state programs. At least there's some state programs, but they're very underfunded. And so this is a really big step forward. And I think people, they look at it, say, look at the expense, and look at this. Well, okay, I'm worn out on that. Look at the expense. We blow money on stupider stuff than we ever thought of, and this is important. So this I really am on board with this one, providing mental health services and suicide prevention and other resources for a person in the community without the wherewithal to do it, to get this mental help they need or get help with somebody they love. And also, is it going to put somebody in a red flag watch list? Very possibly, but they need to be. very possibly they'll be put on the red flag watch list, or maybe it'll be the first step towards a red flag list. And, and the thing is about the red flag list, I'm going to go back to this just right now, I suppose. The red flag thing is not a permanent mark of Cain that you'll never get rid of. Once you're deemed to be socially acceptable, I suppose, or you're mentally healthy, or sufficiently uh, cured, if you will, if there's such a thing, but sufficiently able to get back into society, you could be taken off these lists as well by a medical professional or a judge. It's not something that is a permanent mark, and that's a misnomer, or that's a kind of a misrepresentation of a red flag list. Is like if you get put on a red flag list at 19 because you're antisocial behavior, but you get the proper medication, the proper treatment and counseling, and say like by age 25 you're a suitable citizen of society, you can get off that list. And people think that red flag list is going to keep you from owning a gun for the rest of your life. That's not true. But you also need to have these services, and we really do lack as a country available mental health care. We as a society in the last 3 years in particular have grown more and more violent because of the pandemic, because of the economy, because of culture, whatever you want to talk about it. And a lot of this being driven by people that did not have mental health access. Now, would that have solved all the problems? Of course not. None of these things are going to prevent all problems. We could pass this law letter for letter and put it into place, and the states could be on board, and we're still going to always have that possibility of a mass shooter, because you can't legislate against evil, but you can make it much harder. And so you're going to have 5 years from now, 4 years, of God forbid, something else happen. But if you make it much more difficult, maybe some of those that would have happened won't happen. And we'll never be able to prove that. But there you are. But again, back to the healthcare situation. Investing in mental health programs and school safety resources in schools. This includes training for school personnel and students, as well as early identification and intervention programs. Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times Seth, any other educator in this system has said that this young person, this young man, this young woman needs help. And we'll send them to the counselor. And all the counselor really could do, because of his or her very limited access and time, was point them towards very underfunded and overused, if you will, or just overwhelmed mental health opportunities in the community, mental health care providers in the community. Here's a pamphlet, here's a number to call, things like that. But as far as like intense or one-on-one counseling and other types of intervention programs, the schools are overwhelmed by this. And people say, well, is that really the purview of the schools? Aren't they there to just teach them how to read and write? And it's absolutely no. And it never has been. It never has been. School is not just learning material. It's also a means of indoctrinating you into culture of the society. It's a means of accessing you and equipping you to be a good citizen. And that doesn't necessarily mean you know how to, you know, handle division of fractions, or know how to handle the dangling proposition in an English sentence. You know, those are great, but I'm just saying the whole purpose of school is to make citizens. And if we have a potential citizen that needs help at 15, there's probably nobody other than a family member that's in better position to direct that person towards mental health care than a school administrator, teacher, counselor, because we spend more time with these kids than a lot of them do with their parents. And so this is absolutely something we need, absolutely. And also that school safety resources. Uh, we have in our system a certain number of school resource officers, but that's about maybe a third of the number of schools we actually have here in BISD. And right now, I'm led to understand that both BISD and Burleson PD are coordinating their responses to make sure that we don't have a Uvalde type of situation where the law enforcement completely failed on it. There's no other way to put it. I mean, I felt pity for him at the beginning, but after reading more and more about how the Uvalde PD and other officials failed to intervene after the shooting started, there's just no excuse. Now, I know for a fact Burleson PD does training because I've seen it with my own eyes. You know, I've been on campus on a Saturday where Burleson PD did some training, but I am very much in favor of having a school resource officer on every campus. And the federal government's going to be providing a lot of the money. The big argument was, well, look how expensive it is. Well, that argument's going to be a little less so if they're going to be available for grants from the federal government and through the states to provide resource officers. And you say, well, it's sad that we have to have a resource officer at an elementary school. They're going to point back to Uvalde 2 weeks ago. Every school is at risk. It isn't just that high school in Florida, in Parkland, Florida, or it wasn't just that high school down in south of here in Santa Fe near the coast. Obviously, elementary schools are targeted, so we do need resource officers. Kind of a side note, when I was leaving BISD, I went to go work for Southwest Christian. The first day I ever went on that campus, they had this, little booth. I had to go in. They had a little arm barring the way in, and here comes the security guard to take my name and all this other stuff. And this guy looked like he had just got out of a gym. He was cut. All right, this guy was buff, buzz cut, looked serious. Now, I'm not saying that they all have to look like G.I. Joe or whatever, but this guy looked like, you don't screw around with. I would bet there's a lot of ex-vets that could do this job appropriately, properly, with the training, know how to handle guns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I would bet there's a lot of ex-veterans that we could hire to do this. Maybe, I don't know exactly who or where, but I'm just saying that the idea that we don't have personnel is not right. The idea that we don't have the money is no longer going to be a factor because it's going to be available. And I hope, and I would, knowing Jimerson and the school board the way I do, I'm quite sure they're going to access this. You betcha. Whatever criticism you have BSD, and I don't have a lot right now, whatever the criticisms may have, this ain't one or should be. They take it pretty seriously. Okay. Now, so I hope that we do this. Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to run to the next round of commercials and go over the last 3 or 4, or 2 or 3 actually, and then make some general comments. So, Otto, hope you're doing well. I hope things are going well. Our place, as always, I ate there twice last week. It's a good place to go. It's just a very friendly place, and like I mentioned before, it's a very diverse audience. So obviously, people feel comfortable there of all walks of life, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing, and I hope that continues. I'm sure it will, as long as Otto's in charge, because that's his goal. And thank you, Otto, for everything you're doing for us in the community. Thank you to Chris. Same thing. I hope you had fun at the Tiki Party Friday night, and I'm sure you'll be having some more events pretty soon. I mean, all summer long they'll be having promotionals. They always have some sort of cigar vendor coming in, and apparently, from what Chris tells me, they've become kind of like a stopping point, a mandatory stopping point for a lot of these cigar promoters because it's become that well known in the cigar community. So that's a good thing. So they have great inventory. You can get a drink, have a smoke, have a conversation. Like Tiffany and I were talking about on Friday. She goes in on a Friday or a Wednesday afternoon, just a random Wednesday afternoon, and it's plenty of people there because that's where business is getting done. So check it out, wild. Also, thank you to Antonio at Proactive Payment Solutions. Hit proactivepaymentsolution.com and help you with your points of sales operations, help you with your with any kind of online business transactions you're doing. It could help you get the best rates, the cheapest rates, the best program for your particular industry when it's tailored for it and that kind of thing. So talk to Antonio. He knows what he's talking about. So there you go. And also Tiffany, I had her on Friday for the Local Life magazine, and it's great as always. And so check out locallifetx.com if you want to see the online version. Also, the magazine's out everywhere. And also, I encourage you to listen to the show either on YouTube or the podcast, particularly the last 20 minutes or so, because she speaks from the heart, and she's a good woman and a great Burleson community citizen. Also, along those same lines, through Local Life, you can nominate a hometown hero. Go to her page, and there's a hometown hero page that you can nominate somebody. I'm looking at it right now, in fact, and you can nominate somebody that works for the city, like a policeman or a firefighter, or somebody just involved in the community, somebody that runs a business that does more than just sell stuff or do stuff. They contribute to the city, and you can do it multiple times. And so a hometown hero from Burleson, Crowley, or Joshua, someone who makes a community better. So look on her page. There's a QR code. Hit that, jump on it, nominate people. And if you're on her email, it's there right now. That's where I found it. Okay. Now, back to the show. What else? Let's see. Broadening the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, also known as NICS, to include convicted domestic violence abusers and those included in a domestic violence restraining order, including those who were in a romantic relationship other than marriage. This provision would close what is known as the boyfriend loophole. In other words, if you're convicted of domestic abuse, spousal abuse, child abuse, whatever, that's going to be a red flag. You're not going to get a gun. Okay. But what was a loophole was that you had situations where if you were like living with someone, or if you weren't married to them officially, or you're dating, it didn't cover dating violence. And so this kind of expands the definition of domestic abuse. So if you have somebody that's beaten up on his girlfriend or her boyfriend or something like that, or involved in some sort of domestic partner abuse, this would prevent the gun ownership as well, just like you would if you were convicted of assault of your wife or spouse or whatever. So this boyfriend loophole is a big one, because you had a situation where guys were, really guilty of crimes, but since they weren't married to them, they weren't enough to keep them from getting a gun. And this will do that to prevent. And when I keep saying the stats show overwhelmingly it's young men that this is targeted towards, because this is where it is. Also, this one, strengthening efforts to focus on criminals who illegally buy and traffic guns and dealers who illegally sell guns without proper licensing. Well, okay. I want to jump on this one in a little bit more detail. That already is in the books. The problem that I had, and even Seth had to some degree, certainly, and we both shared that concern, is that the rules we have right now are not being enforced. I don't know if putting stronger language in the legislation is going to make some lard butt bureaucrat work harder at his or her job to get this done. But what you're having in a lot of these communities is that you have very lax enforcement and almost no prosecution. And the cities are getting fed up. Last Tuesday, liberal San Francisco recalled Chesa Boudin, their district attorney, because he would not prosecute these kind of crimes. For example, let's say you get pulled over for a traffic violation, and then you see your guns in the back seat. He would not prosecute that case because he said probably it was inappropriate to stop that car in the first place. And so you had a lot of this lax enforcement of laws because the progressives were so determined that the law enforcement system that concerned guns were either arbitrary and fair or racially oriented, that they wouldn't enforce them. The U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, which is Chicago, basically, when he was nominated by Mr. Biden and confirmed by the Senate, he comes out and says, we will not prosecute what they call straw buyers, which means you bought a gun for somebody else that shouldn't have had a gun, that they're not going to prosecute gun crimes. And Chicago is blown up. Now, so when people talk about a proliferation of guns on the streets, they want to blame conservatives, the NRA. The truth of the matter is, many of these cities are being overwhelmed by gun violence because of progressive law enforcement policies. Portland, the same thing. Seattle, the same thing. LA, the same thing. St. Louis, Chicago, I've already mentioned. Austin. These communities have taken the view that strict gun enforcement is done with an intent for racial motives, and therefore they have defunded the police or underfunded it. They have elected prosecuting attorneys that will not enforce the law because they think it's unfair that the police are targeting certain minority groups, and that's what the gun laws are all about. And so they're looking more on a racial equity basis, and these guns are just destroying these communities. And the people of San Francisco realize that. If you're a progressive prosecutor not aggressive, progressive prosecutor in San Francisco, and you get recalled 60-40, that tells you even San Franciscans have had enough. Seattle just elected a Republican prosecuting attorney. And if you get a Republican to be elected to prosecute crimes in Seattle, even they are having enough. Austin's becoming very dangerous. They defunded their police, and they have put very strict restrictions on arrests on these type of things, and that's the real problem. Now, so I've never. It always bugged me a lot that when we had this gun violence in these communities, in many cases, you have situations in where law enforcement is either lax or forced to be restricted. Buffalo, their mayor is a socialist. And that's not me calling her out. That's what she calls herself. And so when they have these kind of lax enforcement, when they see that they're going to strengthen efforts to focus on criminals who legally buy guns, et cetera, it is you have to have something more on the page than just what's on the page, rather. I would like to see people who lose their jobs because they didn't get the gun check fast enough. Right now, if you don't have your background check done within 3 days, you get the gun. Well, it'll be up to the dealer. In most cases, they're gonna sell you the gun. So if I went in there and I had all this background and I go through the process and 3 days pass and nothing's happened, I got a gun. I could be, Charles Manson. But if I don't get processed in 3 days, then I have a gun. And that's crazy. Also, I would think that if you lie on this form, you should spend 6 months in the joint. But then you'd have Hunter Biden in the joint because in 2017, he lied on one of these applications because if you go to buy a gun from a federally licensed dealer, there's a whole list of things. I talked about this with Seth, a whole list of things that would keep you from buying a gun. One of which is that you're a drug addict, which Hunter Biden is, or at least was, but he he has some background issues, but he lied on that and he got a gun anyway because he's Joe Biden's son, apparently. But this is what I'm talking about. Hunter Biden should have done time in jail for that. And we can talk about laptops all we want, but he should have been in jail for that alone. But that didn't happen. And people who rely on these things, they get caught. Well, go about your business and leave me alone. It's supposed to be a crime, but they don't enforce it. I would like to see repercussions on federal employees that don't do their job in this. If they fail and to get this done in time, they need to lose their job. They don't necessarily need to go to jail or not, something like that, but they need to lose their jobs. But they need to do their job. And so when I see strengthening efforts to focus on criminals and gun dealers and traffickers that are bringing in guns, by the bushel load, this law won't stop that. But this law will make it more painful and punitive if they get caught doing it. Okay? The reason why guns flood our cities is because the people that are bringing these guns in know they could do it with impunity. They know that they're not going to get caught, and if they do, they'll probably get nothing. And we have progressive prosecutors all over the place that will not prosecute crimes. The Dallas District Attorney, John Creuzot, has said basically we're not going to prosecute crimes of shoplifting under $750. So they basically gave a gift card to every felon in Dallas County, a $750 gift card. And we've seen what's happening out in the coast where people walk in with trash bags and just dump stuff in and walk out like, what are you going to do about it? We've seen plenty of videos like that. We need to enforce the law, and I hope this will to make it happen. It doesn't matter what they write down on the paper about, cracking down if they're going to have the same lard butts doing the same poor job that they've been doing it before. So in brief, to sum this up, I like this law for the most part. And like I said, would I have added some? I would not have objected if they raised the rifle buying age to 21. I think that's a good idea. But because it lacks that, I'm not going to say, well, I'm not going to vote for it. I would support this because I think it provides the mental health and school security needs that we need. I think it provides a framework for doing a red flag law that's appropriate. And Texas won't have any excuse, even though some in the legislature will use it. I think it's the idea that we're going to be checking the background of these guys when they were juveniles is a very good idea. So I'm in favor of it for the most part. And would I vote for it? Absolutely. And would the NRA come hollering and yelling at me? Probably. But the thing about the NRA is that people think that the gun lobby has bought Congress. That is not the truth. The NRA ranked out of the top 1,000 in the last election cycle in terms of advertising, and they were like 850 out of 1,000 in terms of lobbyist expense. Why? Because they don't have to spend that much. They got so many voters that are part of the NRA. But the thing about it, if you're part of the NRA, you should welcome these things because it addresses the issues the NRA has been yelling about for all this time, mental health issues. And it doesn't take anybody's gun away. There's nobody kicking the door down to confiscate your gun. And if you're a law-abiding citizen, you'll still have access to it. I don't see anything in this that would prevent the constitutional purchase of a gun. And people say, well, it's an absolute right. Well, no, it's an absolute right to own a gun if you are not a threat to society and you are a capable gun owner. We don't give kooks guns just because there's a Second Amendment. All right. People say it's an absolute right. No, it is not a restriction on gun ownership or the Second Amendment to keep them out of people who are going to use them to turn around and kill kids. Okay. And so we need to move away from this absolutism. Like it says that on the page, end of conversation. That's not the case because we have other restrictions on the First Amendment. For example, you can't just threaten people to get away with it. You can't slander or libel people and get away with it. Those are restrictions on the First Amendment. You can't sacrifice people because it's your religious practice. So there's a restriction on your religious rights, things like that. Okay. Now, I believe in the Second Amendment. I really do. I believe it's very important. But I don't want guns in the hands of kooks. And I think this law comes closer than what we've had in 30 years to doing something about it. Now, is it going to pass? Well, there's a couple on the fringes that are already raising hell about it. AOC is already talking about how she doesn't like the criminal enforcement laws and how it's going to focus on juveniles and other stuff. However, is it going to be brought up in the House? Yes. I'm looking for my quote from Ms. Pelosi. Here it is. Ms. Pelosi, when asked if it's going to bring it up in a Democratic House, she says, if it's life-saving and can make a difference and they have bipartisan support for it, then we would welcome it, even though it won't be everything we want. Well, that's politics. I don't want them to get everything they want. Also, they talk about John Cornyn. I'm looking for a quote from him. I got all confused. Here it is. Cornyn says, this is not about creating new restrictions on law-abiding citizens. It's about ensuring the system we already have in place works as intended. But will this bill pass in the Senate? I say yes. Why? Because there's 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats that are on board with this. There was a bipartisan committee. The 10 Republicans, John Cornyn, Rory Blunt of Missouri, Richard Burr of North Carolina, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, Susan Collins of Maine, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Rob Portman of Ohio, Mitt Romney of Utah, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, and Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania. All those are red states except for Maine. And so you have 10 senators from reds that represent 9 red states that are on board with this, and they will pass to bring it forward. So it should bust the filibuster. And that doesn't also include probably Murkowski, who will be probably on board. And there's a couple other senators I can think of that will probably be prone to support this. Now, I know Ted Cruz is going to raise hell about it, but that's Ted Cruz. Also, the Democrats had Manchin and Sinema on board, so they'll have the votes to bring it to a vote. And probably my guess is it'll be 65-35 when it's all said and done. And then it goes to the House. And I bet it's going to be a lot closer because you're going to people on the far left, like AOC, going to say it doesn't do enough to take guns out of people's hands. And you're going to have people on the far right, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, saying it's a unconstitutional restriction of my rights to carry around whatever I feel like carrying around. But I still think it'll pass. I hope Roger Williams passes it or Kay Granger passes it. Will they? I don't know. We'll see. It's coming up. Hopefully they'll vote on this before the end of this month, because after that they go into like a 3-week vacation. They come back for a couple of weeks and then take the whole month of August off. Good heavens. They used to complain about teachers taking the summers off. So that's the possibilities. I do believe it'll pass. I hope it does. I hope you'll send this to your friends so they can get a better understanding what's in the law, as opposed to just having somebody on TV tell them what it is. I hope this has been enlightening. Like I said, it's not perfect, and it does rely on people doing their jobs. And again, people aren't doing their jobs. This whole thing else is just paperwork. But it's encouraging, particularly the mental health issues, the school security issues, the juvenile record issues. When I read that, for the first time in a long time, I had a little bit of hope that at least the Senate had an ounce of sanity. And when you're assessing it for yourself, you're going to find things you're not that crazy about. But don't let that get in the way of the larger picture. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Don't let the fact that one or two things in it or they didn't include in it overweigh the overall intent. I think this is a good bill. I hope it passes. All right. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about the January 6th hearing. I thought about doing that today, but I wanted to give that more time at this more time. So I'll be talking about the January 6th hearing tomorrow. I'll be addressing is it necessary, and was that Thursday night show worth it, and all this other business. And let's see. Oh yeah, Thursday I have Jimmy Nico, the dog trainer of Burleson, basically also the dog trainer for the Texas Rangers. We're going to be talking about a little bit about dogs, but mostly we're going to talk about his experiences in Afghanistan. He's had multiple tours in Afghanistan. So we're going to talk about his experience there and what he thinks of what's going on now, what happened last summer, and get his opinion on all those things. So look forward to Thursday with Jimmy Nico. Let's run through the ads real quick, and then we'll say our tearful goodbyes. Thank you, Daniel, across at Burleson. Hope you're doing well. Hope you enamored kids are doing well. Thank you for your sponsorship, as always. Thank you, Shandy. Hope you and the kids are doing well. The 817 Live page, check it out if you want to see what's going on in this area. Also, check her out if you want to talk about real estate, because she knows where it is and what's coming on the market even before it's posted, before the sign goes up in the yard. Thank you to Rex. I'm looking at, let's see what's happening on stock market as we speak. About 600 points down. Yikes. You need somebody like Rex to help hold your hand and navigate through it. So hit myfinancialbox.com, hit the link, go about your business. He'll contact you, and y'all will have maybe a little coffee, and you can talk about the markets and whatever else. Thank you to Gayla. Hope you had a good trip. We'll see you this week at the B&I meeting, hopefully. Southern Gym, fine jewelry and gemstones on the top of the Windmiller building. It's got great inventory and a great staff. Of course, I'm biased since Mrs. Allard's part of that staff. Thank you to Michelle over at Michelle Humphrey at Hotworks on 731 over at the Commons. So get yourself an infrared workout. It's a type of workout you could do in this kind of weather. You'll get hot, but it won't be stressing your body out. And so it's in a safe environment, and it's got security and everything. So you're good to go. Hotworks, check it out. Also, thank you to Mandy. I look forward to seeing the stuff that we're going to get in about 7 or 8 days. Creative Concepts by Mandy. If you're looking for promotional items, look at her webpage and her offering. She does great work. I've seen it for other members of BNI, and they love it. Thank you, Otto. Bet we'll be seeing you sometime this week. Everybody goes to our place at least once a week, it seems like. Our place is a great place, very hometown place on the highway in Alsbury since 1986. Also, thank you to Chris over to Wild Cigar. Hope you had a good weekend. You'll have a good week today. Go do some business over there. Have a cigar, have a drink, talk over business. A lot of people doing it these days. It's become the place to do it for those mid-afternoon meetings. Also, thank you to Antonio at Proactive Payment Solutions. Check him out for your point of sales operations and other online facilities. He can help you out with the right programs for your industry. So check out proactivepaymentsolution.com. Also, Tiffany, thank you for the great magazine. Thank you for the great visit on Friday. It was one of the best meetings, one of the best shows I think we ever had. She's just a wonderful person. And also nominate that hometown hero. Go to her page. There's that QR code. Hit the link. If you got her email address, she'll probably have already sent it to you. Do that for somebody that you really respect in this community that's done a great job. All right, Taylor, you still with me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Tomorrow we're going to talk about January 6th, and I hope to have enough research done on that. It's a very difficult, or not difficult, complex. That's the word I want to use, complex topic. So we'll see y'all tomorrow.